All right, ladies, thanks so much for joining us today for these wonderful conversations we're having as a part of the ETPrime Women Awards. And the theme for this particular conversation are women really more suited to leading in times of crisis? Are they tuned to actually lead better? We've already started to see this trend across the world. A lot has been said about it. A lot has been talked about. And today we have three leaders to discuss this with us, what really helps to make women stand out in a time of crisis. Let me introduce our guests. We've got Ameera Shah joining us, promoter at MD, Metropolis Healthcare. Also, Harshbeena Zaveri, Managing Director of NRB Bearings, and Zarin Daruwala of Standard Chartered Bank, the CEO. And we're really looking forward to getting a different and varied perspective from all of you. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, let me just start off with you then, Ameera, in terms of how women leaders have managed to treat the entire pandemic situation, approach it differently, perhaps find more innovative or empathetic solutions at a time like this when employees at a large scale are either being laid off or needing to work from home. Do you feel they've come out stronger? And if so, why do you think that is? What's helped to keep them in good stead?
Hi, Abha. So look, I think, while of course we all love to generalize it, and sometimes the whole gender debate is very fun, I agree with you that majority of women will behave in a certain way, and a majority of men may behave in a certain way. That's obviously not necessarily the case for each gender. In my own company, I've actually seen my CEO, who's male, actually look at it from a more multifaceted way while making decisions on a day-to-day basis. I didn't hear him either talk about, oh, let's let these many people go, let's cut salaries. Actually, none of that. It was actually very clear that we must keep all the people on board because we're healthcare, we're essential services. This is the time for us to motivate our people. But the reasons were different. The reasons were from a perspective of being the brand that retains talent, being the brand that supports our employees at the time of crisis. It was not so much of a emotional reason or a humane reason or a empathetic mindset. But it was more of a business mindset to say, look, this is why. I mean, the outcome may be the same, but I think sometimes men and women may use different tools at different points. I feel a lot of the women, especially in crises, leaders, are able to look at different points of data while making a decision, while often we have seen men who specialize in very focused, being very sort of first, in one direction. And I think that definitely helps in crisis situations. So yeah, I mean, I think, the number of women leaders, especially political leaders who've been very successful has been very interesting. While I just saw WhatsApp that came in that all the so-called autocratic leaders across the world, which are male, have really seen a very fast spread in infection and a real drop in political power and fame.
I'm just going to probe that a little further before I go to the others. But there has been a point of view that some of the women leaders, particularly, let's say, Arden in New Zealand or, in some of the Nordic countries like Finland, they haven't had as much of a challenge. Would you say that's just another way for some of the men to kind of put down women leaders, or would you say there's some truth to that?
Look, I mean, I think it's very difficult to contemplate. Look, of course, the scale of challenge in New Zealand versus India versus the US has been different. But I think when you look at the context of the problem that somebody has inherited and how they're dealing with it, I think one stark difference is the level of communication. I think the strong leaders, think the strength comes in making decisions independently and communicating them top down. To the rest of the country. I think what we've seen with some leaders like the one you referred to in New Zealand, there's been so much bilateral communication and constant communication. And I think that frequency, the way of communication being soft and democratic, I think has been what has really stood out in this time.
Okay. All right. Harshbeena, let me bring you in here and get your perspective on the kind of qualities you feel women leaders imbibe, because, there have been several studies that do suggest that there are several qualities that make women leader very successful, and those are attributes that are actually welcome and help to also make organizations more productive, that they're increasingly being more recognized when it comes to Fortune 500 companies. So is this an opportunity where some of those are being recognized and appreciated?
I definitely believe that women shine in a crisis, and I feel that that has been well proven even in the corporate world, because most companies, when they're at a very, very high risk of survival, take on women leaders, which they don't necessarily do when they're in a comfortable zone. Now, specifically, what are those traits that make women shine in a crisis situation? I feel that the combination of empathy and compassion and decisiveness and being able to evaluate how serious the situation is, using what Ameera said, their multi-pronged approach, or their ability to wear different hats and have a bigger picture perspective. For example, you mentioned Angela and Ardam. And Angela said right up front, it's serious. Take it seriously. And I think that that ability to right away not have this sense of bravado, for example, I think the characteristics that good leaders need, which is humility, empathy, individualized consideration, is not something that comes easily to alpha male leaders. And while they do very well in status quo situations, women being outliers and not really part of the system, they have very little to lose. So when these kind of situations come up, they grip it, I would say, much more clearly, do what needs to be done, because all said and done, they've constantly had to do.
Zarina, let me get you in as well on this now. And, you're also seeing this from a global perspective. You've seen remote working set in, even before the lockdown, but the kind of national lockdown that we saw here, the pace with which it kind of hit, how did you manage or tackle that situation? What were some of the challenges that you faced as a leader of a global entity here in India?
So actually, we had the benefit, I would say, of a little bit of advanced warning, because we knew what was happening in China and Hong Kong. And in fact, way before the lockdown, 1 month before, we had our crisis management group and what we call the pandemic working group set up. We had actually started operating from split locations. We had already started testing the roster system, where 1/3 would come every third day. So a little bit planning was there. We had the benefit of that. Having said that, I don't think we expected the kind of severity of the lockdown that came and suddenness. So I think the important thing that we had to grapple with was the call center, because the call center actually, the way it works is, you have a customer calling and the call goes to any agent, customer servicing agent, who's free, and that is a high piece of technology. And we really, within 2 or 3 days, we figured out that also, where call center got operational, and with all our customer service executives working from home. So some planning we had done. We had ordered a lot of laptops in anticipation of the COVID situation playing out. So to some extent, we were well planned, but some things, I think one has to take it as one goes. I think one of the other things that one learns through this crisis is that you need to plan for your employees in case somebody gets, a virus. And those were the big learnings as we went along.
Okay. You also had a lot of, sort of challenges to deal with, the learnings, as you mentioned, with your call centers. As well, you had large captive call centers, as you mentioned, across time zones. So in terms of the kind of attendance you saw, dealing with perhaps people who didn't want to come into work, who had other issues at home, how did you survive this kind of entire transition to a work from home model? And did you, as a leader, as a female leader in charge, face any kind of in terms of perhaps, was it more demanding for you in terms of that you would be more, tolerant or empathetic, or any of those things?
Yeah. So I think one thing that comes very much at the fore in this kind of situations is your human-centric approach to any decision. And I think that is important as a leader, because at the end of it, it's lives that you are dealing with when you tell people to come to work. So as banks, we had to keep our branches going. And throughout the whole period, our branches have been functioning. So one of the first things I did when the lockdown happened was I called about 20 to 30% of our branch managers individually. And I tried to understand, how are they facing the situation on the ground? Are there any issues that they are struggling with? And that kind of gave me good insights as to, how should we make our employees comfortable while they are working. The other thing was simple things like conveyance for employees so that they don't, catch the disease. How do we ensure that we keep minimal staff in branches because the footfall had fallen? So there were a lot of learnings, and we kept on refining it. Even in any of our subsequent decisions, whether it's coming to office, in fact, we have completely left it optional to employees. If they are not comfortable, we don't ask people to come. We are quite comfortable with them working from home. And also, we've kept in mind that a lot of the women also have the additional burden of managing old parents or kids, along with managing their work. So we've kept it a little bit in the sense, working hours can be a little bit flexible in terms of how, so long as the job gets done. I think one of the things that has worked well is that the volume of transactions is obviously not the same as pre-COVID. So to some extent, that has also helped in managing this in terms of the capacity, that we have working from home. The volume is a little lesser. So it's helping people manage to the best of their abilities.
And even if that does stay the way for a little while, I wonder how things are going to evolve later. And Ameera, you've spoken a lot about how organizations will become more inclusive, that women will adapt. They will, because they are more adaptive by nature, and so there'll be a better integration of personal lives with of course the demands of work. How much of a reality do you see that being? Do you feel that other leaders across sectors will also adapt to this, see the benefits of this? Because the initial reading was that women would suffer the most. Most women were in the service industries. Most women were the first to leave to, as Zarin mentioned, look after responsibilities at home. But the next wave of analysis seems to predict that people will find a balance.
Look, I think, any of these situations will always go through multiple phases. It's never going to reach its final balance immediately. So I think initially, like you rightly said, I think a lot of women in the service industry faced the brunt of it. They had to stop going to work. They had to take care of the homes, etc. And I don't know how they managed. It must have been excruciatingly challenging. But I think for senior women in organizations, I do believe that this crisis will create opportunities for women to now rise potentially a little faster than they would have in a purely brick and mortar world. For various reasons. I think the old boys club that we know exists in many industries and many companies, in a lot of ways does not have the same fluidity to continue working in the same paradigm. And now, because, that used to happen over smoke breaks and bar drinks after work and, various of those styles of working, which now suddenly puts everybody at an equal platform, assuming you're all working from a digital platform. So I think some of those, cozy habits will change potentially. I think it'll also give women who are actually tending to be more conscientious, and usually women tend to have a much more sincere work ethic. Like Zarin said, as long as they get the work done, who cares what time it is? You can balance everything the way you want at home. So I think it will give women a chance to rise, and I really hope that it will, because it's really high time, that we continue to live in a very patriarchal world, especially in India. And while, of course, we've seen a lot of change happen in the last 20 years, where we have seen women leaders come up, there's a reason why we see the same faces in most of our panels and webinars and speeches and award ceremonies, right? Because there's unfortunately only a handful. So yeah. I really hope that changes, and this crisis, the positive silver lining of it could be hopefully more of a gender equality at the workspace.
Harshbeena, coming to you and taking from where Ameera left off, do you see the fact that this pandemic has flattened the curve somewhat, to say, in terms of gender dynamics, that perhaps we'll also see more collaboration going forward? You yourself are in an industry where you are seeing so many different participants at play. Do you see, a change in behavior, more collaboration perhaps, a healthier exchange of ideas going forward?
So it's funny because when I was thinking about this panel, I said, let me put together 2 or 3 of my absolutely most favorite quotes. And I don't know if you know, but I have a degree in anthropology and in urban migration. So I come from a very different background. I'm an urban planner and with a basis of social anthropology. And one of my favorites, Charles Darwin quotes, which are not so popular, is that in the long history of humankind and animal kind, those who have learned to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed. And that, in fact, is really the crux of what you're speaking about. And I think that collaboration and improvisation, in other words, moving with the flow and doing that in a sort of environment of trust when it comes to human beings and just following your instinct when it comes to animals is what really makes the difference. And I think that when it comes to the specific point that Ameera and you were discussing, it's this extreme consciousness of our vulnerability that makes women different. And this is not just a compassion issue. We are also very clear on how vulnerable the economy is. And alpha male leaders are trying to choose between compassion and the economy. And women are actually leveraging their extreme mental flexibility, which allows them to constantly, I would say, restate the goals as more information comes in without causing confusion. So they're the leader of the pack, and they keep improvising and collaborating with everyone and have this amazing, anthropologically speaking, feedback mechanism. And this ability allows women really to excel. I would say in terms of a business or a policy environment, it allows them to create an overall framework. So they're clear what they want to achieve. They communicate this very effectively. And they keep adjusting the finer details as a matter of clarity rather than a matter of confusion. This is diametrically opposed to the man-male method that we are watching. Therefore, I think that this has led in companies and in countries to a consistently improved situation when women are handling it. In spite of all the challenges, the companies and the countries themselves are going from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, because this improvisation and collaboration is built into the model.
I think one thing that's coming through what all 3 of you are saying is a resilience that women have. I also draw on the strength that women have shown, and I think it's become more apparent also how powerful they can be. As Ameera mentioned, when you're not sort of boxed in by having to show what you're capable of through uncomfortable situations for some, when you're kind of even out the playing field, women are able to emerge a little stronger and highlight, some of the factors that are working for them. The other element that could work to their advantage also is choice. When everything is going online and everything is digital today, they are again able to play a bigger role. What are some of the factors you feel are really going to help to drive change and going forward?
So as you rightly said, I think the optionality of working from home is something that can really, a woman typically drops off in post the kid or mid-career kind of crisis. And that time the view is, prior to the COVID, the view was that, she's working from home, which means, she's in a way compromising her career. And that's why women then decide to take a gap year or then they completely drop off. I think post-COVID, it is very clear that you can work from home almost as efficiently as you can in sitting in office. And thankfully, in services sector, it is even more so, like banking, insurance, IT. It's much more possible for a woman to work from home. And this gives her an optionality whenever she has that crisis in a personal side to actually seek from my employer the ability to work from home for a few days in a week or maybe a year. And to that extent, she's able to bounce back in her career post that crisis having gone off her personal life. So I think it's a good thing that has happened in terms of realization that you can be almost as efficient working from home, and that will really play out well for women in the future.
For women leaders, Ameera, and I think what frustrates me is that I think as women leaders, they are always the first to be criticized on the back of gender. Coming back to a point you made earlier where you said it's also about competence, right? It's not always just about gender. There are a lot of generalizations. But I think that, when women leaders seem to have to fight that much harder to prove that, to prove their success, and seem to be the first to be criticized on the back of gender should something go wrong. Would you agree? And how does one tackle that?
I'm not sure I agree, Abha. I think yes, we have to work harder. We have to prove ourselves more to get to the top. That's right, because there are fewer of us. But I don't believe that we are criticized the first. I think, I'm not sure of that. I think, in fact, as women, we also get certain flexibilities that men don't get. There are advantages. I remember just, building my business from the time I was 21. If I went and knocked at any door, I didn't know the people at all. I was just doing random cold calls, like through sales, and people would open the door and welcome me in. Which probably, if I was a young guy, they would have kicked me out straight away, right? So, sure. There are benefits that come with the gender as well. I'll tell you another benefit. Today, all of us who are sitting here or otherwise probably land up getting far more media and far more PR because we are women leaders. We are highlighted much more because if we were men, maybe we would have been more lost in a crowd. When I walk into a room and it's, 100 other guys, we stand out automatically. Oh, sure. So, I think there are advantages to it. So, I think we just have to take it with the pinch of salt, take all the good and the bad which comes with it, and honestly not think about it too much. Because I think the more we overanalyze it and the more we think about it, for some women, it lands up becoming either an excuse or a reason for lack of competence or lack of success or whatever. So my way has always been, yes, we are in a patriarchal society, accept it, deal with it, and go beyond it. Find the things that you can use to your benefit and forget the rest.
That's true. And I've always heard you say that.
I would agree with Ameera. Actually, I don't think women leaders have been criticized because they are women. I think it's about either performance or non-performance. So and that's a parameter to judge a leader, not the gender. And we've not experienced that in India.
Just to add to that, I think that there is a criticism that sometimes that they are too empathetic and not decisive enough. So they're not able to take the tough calls. And obviously, this view comes in more from the male fraternity, but I think that's what I was alluding to.
Actually, I have a different view on this, slightly different. I think that going to the question you asked, Zarin, well, I do agree this work from home thing has been a great advantage. Yeah. I actually think that COVID has redefined men and women's roles in the home as opposed to in the workplace, which is what we talk about a lot, right? My husband's chat group is always about trying to crack the housework. And that's something that they haven't really been, in India at least, exposed to the same degree that we have. But I believe very strongly, and Indian philosophy supports that view, that women traits are as much to be respected in a man as male traits in a woman. And if you look at the Upanishads and the Vedas, and I have actually done deep study on this because this is one of my passions, you look, for example, at Shiva, the destroyer of evil, and in the trilogy, he is depicted as Ardha Narishwara. And he's half a woman and half a man, and he's amalgamated Parvati and Shiva. Now, if you look at Shakti, for example, Shakti is always female. A man cannot be strong unless he appreciate the female side if he wants to really have true Shakti. And therefore, I think that it's an inclusive world, and even within the business world, we should be really focusing on helping people be themselves, not have this sort of fear of being too womanly or too manly. And in our company, we often talk about this very openly, and we have a conscious attempt at our senior management level to embrace the male and female sides and not be gender defined consciously, formally, as part of our culture statement. And I think, therefore, the inclusivity of the world that we're trying to achieve is better for all of us.
That's very well said. And I completely agree with that, because when women are, as Ameera said, fighting too hard, trying too much, they're often said, okay, they're too assertive, aggressive. It's not appreciated in a woman. And on the other hand, if she's too empathetic, then it's like, oh, that's because she's a woman. So I think the fusion, or just being yourself, is I think critical.
We celebrate man-care. We also celebrate transgenders, because we have a plant in Thailand, and I think it's very important today for us in this COVID situation to really leverage this and move beyond it as human beings.
Yes, so that also gives me such an insight into how what's really happening in terms of as you managing your company, and I want to get that from all of you. Ameera, I know the last time we spoke, you said, you're also managing a team of, 1,000 plus or so, and you've just had a baby yourself. So, I mean, I think you're the living, breathing example of trying to and also being in the healthcare space. It must have just been overwhelming to deal with everything. And as a leader, you've also, of course, been on top of everything. So just share with us, a little bit of insight into how this period has been for you.
Look, I think the period has been very interesting from a perspective of external and internal observations. We have about 5,000 people, Abha, in 5 countries, mostly India. But I also have a CEO who does a lot of the day-to-day stuff, and who I've been grooming for the last 4 years to actually take complete charge day-to-day. And therefore, my involvement is much more strategic in nature. Of course, pre-COVID until the last day of my delivery, I was working sort of 8-10 hours a day. And that's been the same case post my delivery as well. My example is not fair one, because I have so much help and I'm very privileged. So I know what most women go through is much, much harder, because they don't have either the financial resources, the emotional support, or therefore the ability to be able to necessarily multitask everything. So I'm honestly grateful every day because, I've had my parents, I've had my in-laws, I've had nurse, I've had my husband, I've had so many people, and my CEO and my team at work. But I think the 2 things have come out. Number one, that, my team has been able to operate without me day to day and made some tough calls in this very tough environment. And I've come to the realization I'm very happy about it. I'm very disposable and very dispensable. So I think that's a good thing. And I think that's a strength that has come out during this time. Number one. I think number 2, I think my own internal observation about how much I've enjoyed spending time at home and not working 12 hours a day. And, while it has been a very exhausting, emotionally exhausting period, because in the healthcare sector, most of us in the provider space have had a really challenging time operating in these last 3-4 months. Not because we're essential services and we had to provide services, but because of the constant fluctuating policy decisions by every local municipal corporation in every part of the country, which has made us go up and down like a crazy roller coaster. And there have been days we've been harassed, there have been days we've been threatened, and there are days at the same time we have to take care of everybody. So it's been a very emotionally exhausting time. But I think the internal observation has been that while I spent the last 20 years working 12 to 14-hour days to build my business, I've really genuinely enjoyed having the flip side of it, which is being at home, being with family, being with my kid, enjoying those personal connects, and still having the ability to toggle both worlds. The rational, logical world of business and the emotional world of being with a little child. And it's been a great joy, actually.
Oh, that's lovely. And I can see that, that as well in the glow. And Zareen, what about you? I'm a global company, 22,000 plus, at least in the call centers I see in my notes, correct me if I'm wrong, dealing with it on a day-to-day level because of, planning for hospital beds, for collaborations, regulations changing, keeping on top of that as well. How was the roller coaster for you?
So actually, I must confess that as a bank CEO, of course, COVID was a special situation, but we've been having these for last few years. We had demonetization when banks were at the forefront of handling that whole situation. Then there was GST. So we've constantly had a lot of sort of moments. But of course, COVID was different from one viewpoint that most of the people were working from home. So to that extent, but I must confess that it has been quite seamless. Our tech team has really risen to the challenge. And the biggest issue was how do we make people work from home? Because not everybody in the bank had laptops, and you can't shift desktops to homes because sizes of homes in Bombay and many other places are not that big. So really, the challenge was quickly shipping laptops, quickly giving the internet connectivity. But having said that, as I told you, we had planned, so we had ordered a lot of dongles, dongles, etc. So we had planned for some of these eventuality. Looking back, I think we managed quite well. In fact, this is one period where I've had a lot of customers saying good things about the bank, because otherwise what typically lands in my mailbox is customer complaints. Very rarely customers saying nice things, but this was one period where customers were really appreciative. So all in all, it's been, I think, no big mishaps. It's been quite well handled by the teams. And I think the pandemic working group of my team has been empowered to take decisions on the ground, and I'm just supporting them. As Ameera said, at some point, you have to just allow the teams who are closest to the situation on the ground to just take decisions, because you have to take them by the hour, not by the day. And that is what has really played out well. We've not had really any real issues that have created any anxiety for any of our customers.
This just reinforces the topic today, doesn't it? Women leaders, the rights to the fore, in times of crisis, because you all have a smile on your face and you're able to share with us, that you've been on top of this. And I think that's fabulous. Zareen, just while we're on this, do you foresee, like the tech companies have been discussing or actually implementing, work from home becoming a standard even post-COVID? I mean, post-COVID, we don't even know what that scenario is like, but assuming till the end of the year and question mark around next year?
So for my bank, we as a bank have driven by regulatory this thing, and as a foreign bank, we are not permitted to have, it is the special situation, but otherwise you can't have a disproportionate number of employees working from home. You need to be in the office or branches because of the regulatory requirement. But as I see the services sector, I think clearly, as I mentioned, we will see companies using that to a large measure, because it ensures that they can then have the kind of employees who they want to and give them the flexibility, because otherwise you lose good female talent if you don't permit that.
Yeah, true. Harshbeena, what about you? What's been your experience?
So ours is a very difficult experience because we're a manufacturing company.
Yeah. Yes.
So really, we took great advantage of the lockdown. That's one thing that I would like to highlight. We completely restructured our company, and I started in March because luckily in January I was traveling, and I'm 99% sure I had COVID in January because my voice is still not come back. And I do need to get an antibody test and check that out. But I came back from many parts of the world in January and February. And I, believe it or not, socially distanced myself from everyone, even though I was at work. And everyone thought I was crazy because they hadn't even heard of this, half of the people around. But to answer your question specifically, we completely retrained our entire management team in the factories so that they would understand cash flow. because suddenly we flipped over in advance during the lockdown from profitability to cash flow management. And we needed people to understand the difference. So we did that. We did huge attitudinal training programs for short-term goal orientation. So a company like ours, which has always been formally focused on the long term, needed to reorient, saying that, listen, if we don't get through the next 3 months, there is going to be no long term. So I think that was one of the things. The second thing that we did is we restructured our company and said, we have 0 sales in April. So we are now a new company. We're newborn. So we formally, with written feedback from about 180 people,
wow.
we got I got 3 pages from 180 people, which I studied over a week alone, not with my management team initially, and did a town hall. So I give direct feedback to the whole company on what the company was worrying about. Based on that town hall, we then broke up and created different collaborative teams on how should we rebuild NRB as if it's a new company, because for the next 24 months, the challenge would be huge. And it was very exciting because for the first time you can say, oh my God, we're a new company. We don't have to be correcting things. We can start from scratch again, which for a legacy company is quite a fun thing to do, actually. Yeah. So the idea was to simplify decision-making, collate all the information with structured teams collating it, and take decisions every week with a war room, which was immediately communicated all around. This took the entire anxiety away. It created I would really say, it created a comfort zone and deep mutual trust and respect for the leadership team. So it was a combo. They knew we would get through this, no question, and well, but they also knew what we expected from them. And frankly, we expect a lot more work from them. So we definitely didn't fall into this trap that a lot of companies have of people just being chilled out and stuff. For example, if anybody moved away from the city where they were supposed to be, we said, we're not supposed to pay you. Sorry. You had to take the company's input before you moved. We did give them a month's salary out of compassion, but we said, either you come back, we take care of you, we pay for you even if you're in quarantine. We actually help people come back. Or if they decided they couldn't come back, we relocated them formally for a whole year. So things like that. So I think we basically have a totally different company today, if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And that's an interesting, insight into how you've dealt with it and the kind of decisions you had to make. We don't know how long this is going to last. I think some of you may have a better idea than me, from what you've heard. But I think the consensus seems to be that, let's say for 6 months, a lot of uncertainty, hopefully mid next year, a vaccine. In light of that, as we kind of move forward, post the unlocking and trying to get back to normal, I think it's become clear that there are a different set of leadership tools that, yes, perhaps women embody more of, that are being appreciated at a time like this. And as we progress further, and in closing comments from all of you, how do you really see opportunities shape up for women leaders? In the US, Fortune 500 companies, in fact, a lot of the leaders who weren't able to survive the crisis were replaced by women that were perceived by boards to be more compassionate, or more board seats have been filled now with diverse candidates in order to be more inclusive and create a more diversified organization. Do you see actual significant changes as we head into life post-COVID? Zarin?
So I think it's going to be a gradual process in terms of, shifting leadership from, as you said, like the post-financial crisis. Having said that, I think the empathy element will be very much needed in the next 1 or 2 years in the leadership style. So it doesn't matter whether it's a woman or a male, but I think empathy is very much needed. I'll just give a small example of what we did the other day. So we said, we're going to continuously see more and more cases for the next 6-9 months. So what we did was we've tied up with hotels. If somebody wants isolation, Because if a family member gets, and homes are small, we have tied up with hotels. Similarly, we've tied up with a hospital. And we are going to, so if any of our employees gets COVID, God forbid, we have tied up with a hospital. Of course, we'll pay a big premium for the cost, but we said it's well worth it. So that kind of little human element in taking care of employees in this period. Similarly, we've tied up with another agency where employees can get doctors on call or a video call. And we've done all these things so that if anybody has any symptoms, anybody or their family members, we are there with, a sort of organized way of supporting our employees. I think these little things go a long way in sort of employee loyalty, employee feeling that the leadership cares. And that element is something that is needed in leadership, irrespective of who is at the helm of the organization.
Ameera?
I think this time is going to be a big catalyst that's going to allow a lot of change for two categories. One is women and also young leaders. And the reason I say that is because, unfortunately, the legacy being that men, traditionally being the breadwinner in India, have no choice but to get a job and go to work and make money, etc. So whether they are passionate about what they do, they see purpose in what they do is irrelevant. They have to go and economically earn, right? But women who have landed up working, usually because they're not expected to be the breadwinner, have done it usually out of either a passion or an interest to get exposure or an interest to develop. And that's the reason I think you see women having more sincerity and more work ethic when they're actually in the workplace, because it was a choice. It wasn't something that they had to do. Similarly, young leaders of today, we're actually seeing younger kids are actually not doing things because they have to make money, but they're doing things out of a sense of purpose, out of a sense of social purpose or a sense of contributing to the world positively. So I think both these categories are going to actually see this flattening of the curve in some ways of being an opportunity to really stand out in the future, where I believe meritocracy is going to be more important than hierarchy. Sure. Today, when we're all working digitally, you really don't need too many managers to actually manage you. You have to manage yourself. And self-management is going to become a very critical part of all our jobs. So I actually think one of the things corporates are going to have to do is actually teach employees, like Harshbeena was talking about, certain kinds of training, a training in self-management. And actually, this is going to be required more for the men now, because that's not something which has been their skill in the past, right? They've been able to come to a workplace, do their job, have a manager manage them, go back home and have everything else in their life managed by their wives and their mothers. Right. Now, for the first time, self-management is going to be critical. How do you provide work ethic sitting digitally from home? How do you be more responsible for your outcomes, which are all going to be questioned on merit and not on how pally you are to your boss? So I think this is going to be a catalyst for men and women. Women and young leaders are going to soar. Men are going to have to quickly pull up their socks and move forward.
I think what's also emerging from this is really how breaking the status quo, the emergence of young leaders, keeping young women or women at the mid-level in the workforce, as Zarin mentioned, talent that's in the workforce, giving them more responsibility. And that's really going to help to create a whole new generation of leaders going forward, create a whole new status quo going forward. And I, for one, really look forward to that. Thank you all for your time. Sorry, Harshbeena, were you going to say something?
This is my favorite wealthy quote. It's from Nora. It says, how many roads you travel, however many paths you choose, I hope you will choose not to be a lady. I hope you will find some way to break the rules and make a little trouble out there. And I hope you will choose to make some of that trouble on behalf of other women. And I think that's very important. If we don't do that, it will slip back. And political, to ensure that things don't slip back in terms of women's appreciation and position to a pre-COVID.
All right, ladies. Thank you so much. And for answering all my questions so patiently. It was great chatting to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.